All right, welcome in GC Live, early edition, Monday, 9 a.m. Hopefully, you're used to our new time here as we react to South Carolina's. Wow, I don't know what words you use. Controversial, heartbreaking. I mean, just a wild day at Williams-Brice Stadium from start to finish, starting with game day. All eyes on South Carolina, all eyes on campus here in Columbia. Gamecocks ultimately lose 36-33 in a game that frankly had everything. I mean, Chris, I was sitting there as LSU sort of went on what was ultimately their final drive of the game. I was sitting there thinking, one team is not going to be able to sleep tonight because they're going to be thinking about all the missed opportunities that had a place in this game, and a game that had kind of everything. Like, you had controversy, you had big plays, you had bad plays, you had I mean, it felt like we were all at Williams-Brice Stadium. I don't know about y'all. It felt like we were there for 10 hours.
Oh,
And so you're sitting there, and I couldn't help but think this is going to be either another epic stop by the South Carolina defense, and maybe you would say one of the best wins in Williams-Brice Stadium history, or one of the worst heartbreaks for a program that has had its share of heartbreaks over the years, one of the worst heartbreaks in program history. And as we saw, LSU, maybe with some help, we'll talk about all that as well. LSU finds a way to get the 36-33 victory over South Carolina. Chris, where do we even start on this one?
yeah, there's a lot to unpack. It was a long day. It was a long game. I kind of didn't dawn on me until after the game. It's like, man, that was a long game. We were in there for a while. Wes, to go back to the emotions of it all, I was sitting with a couple guys and my wife during the game. And after the kick went wide, sitting with a couple guys that are Gamecock fans, obviously. And there was just kind of just sitting there, just sitting there soaking in the feeling. And when one of them finally spoke, it was paraphrasing a little bit, but the quote was, "This may be the toughest one I've seen," and it was such an emotional roller coaster. You go up 17-0. And I remember thinking at that point early in the game, Wes, you're like, LSU can't block South Carolina's front. And everything's going South Carolina's way for the most part. And then obviously that flipped. On one hand, you're sitting there going, LSU can't block South Carolina. Mostly everything's going right. Maybe the Gamecocks end up rolling in this one. But the feeling I had is at some point LSU is going to counterpunch, right? This is an offense. Garrett Nussmeier's too tough. They're too good up front. They have good coaches too. They're going to counterpunch at some point. So can you weather that storm? And obviously the Gamecocks had too many things that ultimately went against them in the game. Some of it was how the ball bounced. Some of it was adjustments that LSU made. Some of it plays, if you're South Carolina, that you left on the field. And some of it, obviously, we got to be fair and talk about it. There were some very controversial officiating decisions on key plays that no doubt played some type of role, and that's why there's been so much discussion. I do want to give a caveat, Wes, in that we could be sitting here going, God, those officials are rough. Like, they had a rough day. There were some really bad calls. At the end of the day, South Carolina still should have won the game. And I think that's what Shane Beamer focused on right after the game. You got 13 penalties. And I think as time went on, by the time his Sunday teleconference rolls around, he's being more open about, we've sent in more calls than usual. There are lots of things that South Carolina could have done that would have changed the storyline to they're the ones that escaped with the win, right? Like, they let LSU come back. Some bad things happened. You still won the football game. If that kick goes through the uprights at the end, Wes, maybe the referee stuff, maybe they go to overtime and win. Maybe the official stuff is a footnote. It's become a bigger part of the story because of how the game ended. So, man, a lot of good A lot of bad, in more ways than one. What a game. Gut-wrenching outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was. And before we move any farther, let us tell you about our friend Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. As always, if you're in the market for a new home and you're going to need a mortgage, hit up our guy Clint. If you're a renter, wanting to be a first-time home buyer, maybe you're even just wondering what that looks like. What might my payment be? What would a down payment look like? What are interest rates at? Maybe all that stuff is just foreign or a little bit scary to you. Clint, going to make it super easy, super simple, going to walk you through every single step of the process. And also, he'll let you know there are lots of options out there for you that maybe could lower that payment or lower that down payment off the top. So hit up Clint, 803-422-6797. Again, ClintHammond.com. I mean, Chris, I'm torn, man. It was clearly a poorly officiated game. Like, I think that part is pretty obvious, but I can't help but also think all the missed opportunities South Carolina had where you just can't put yourself in that spot. Like, even, is that a forceful hit to the quarterback? Like, there is a rule, apparently, that you can't forcefully hit the quarterback after an interception. I thought it looked kind of like a LeBron flop, in my opinion, but there also is a true fact here of you can't put yourself in those spots as well. I'll tell you what, with all the talk about all the different calls, all the different plays in this game, the one that I just cannot figure out is the offensive pass interference.
Mm-hmm.
I want one explanation that makes any. So, all right, no matter what side of it you fall on, the pick six, the quarterback acted like he got Clowney hit. So, I mean,
it was a soccer flop.
And
I like soccer.
And I'm not picking on Kyle because I felt awful for Kyle because that kid busts his tail every single play and is a difference maker for South Carolina. And I'll say this. I'll say two things. I think this is a talented football team. This team itself is way better than probably anybody thought they were after watching the way the opener went. And they play hard, man. Like nobody can say this South Carolina team does not play incredibly hard. And also, we already got in the chat, the name calling about, do y'all realize how quickly you have to make a decision whether to hit that quarterback or not? Like, do y'all realize how fast the game of football moves at this level? So the ball gets picked. Beamer even said, somebody's told to find the quarterback, make sure he can't make a play on the ball. And in less than a second, you're supposed to find him, get in his way. I need to block him, but I can't block him too hard. And oh, by the way, I've been in freaking warrior mode for 4 quarters. I mean, this is an all-out war out there in sports terms.
Yep.
And you're telling me, I got to hit him, but I just got to get in his way, and I got to make that decision like that. Like, let's remember how fast this moves. It's easy to be like, oh, why'd you deplete him? But this game moves so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The other part is, man, and I know it was just a reaction on his part. If he doesn't throw his hands up like this, I'm wondering if it even gets called, honestly.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's the one where they threw 3 or 4 flags, right?
Oh, they rained down flags.
They peppered the flags.
Yes. So, all right. The other one, apparently, it used to not be a horse collar in the pocket. Now, all of a sudden, it is a horse collar.
Yeah.
And in that one here, all right, so if that is a horse collar, let's assume it is. At least that play, you can say, well, him reaching out and grabbing him is part of what created the interception in the first place. So it's like, all right, you can't like say, well, he cost South Carolina the interception. He caused it in the first place. The other one, you're sitting there going, with the beauty of hindsight and replay, you're going, Nussmeier, who was pursuing the play, by the way, which is, I think, an important aspect of that. The one view, you can see Nussmeier's just standing there. Then he starts to flow towards the interception. And you literally see him get not like he was depleted, but not, a shoulder to the face, it was this. Nussmeier hits the ground. And then on that one view, you literally see the convoy of people go flying by.
Mm-hmm.
So he is starting to pursue the play. Now, the thing that sucks from a South Carolina standpoint is Nussmeier ain't making that play. So it's a pick six. If you just stand in his way, it's a pick six. So that's what sucks about that. But so my point being, I can see the judgment call on either of those plays. I still cannot figure out the offensive pass interference.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
So to hit on a few that, so let's start horse collar. I've tried to look at them and look at the rules as much as I can to try to make sure I'm being fair, because you know how this goes, Wes. A lot of people online, it's Gamecock fans saying that call's BS because I don't like it. It's Clemson fans jumping in the comments saying, that's clearly a whatever because they they don't like the Gamecocks, or Tennessee fans or whoever, right? The best thing to do is actually look at what is the rule, what happened, and then try your best to interpret it. The officiating was very inconsistent. I don't care who you're a fan of, you should be able to agree with that, and we'll dive into that. The horse collar, you're right. I think for this year they expanded it to you can be in the pocket. It used to be you had to be outside. Now for player safety, it's in the pocket. The thing that has come up more is he didn't grab the horse collar, it was the jersey. They expanded that part of the rule separately a while back, where it can be the jersey, the nameplate around that area. And as you said, Wes, yanking on the jersey, it affected the throw. That's probably the primary reason why the throw went where it did. I didn't have as big at the time. I had a problem with the call. I was like, you didn't horse collar him, but you go back and look at it. Okay, I get that one. I actually think that call was correct. I talked to a few other people about it in the SEC as well, not the league office, but other people who coach. And they said, yeah, I think that was a horse collar. The Kyle Kennard play, I'm not clear on what they called. There was actually one instance, Wes, where there was a penalty in the stadium and they literally didn't announce what the penalty was. So we're just sitting there going, I don't know what's going on. The stat book says unnecessary roughness. Is that what it was?
That's my understanding. He used his mic so much he ran the battery down on it. So you could not hear the call in the stadium.
So was it a blindside block? Unnecessary roughness?
You're gonna have to read his lips if you want to know that.
Okay.
I thought. I mean, my interpretation. So it is a blindside block. Part of the unnecessary roughness.
I think yes.
Umbrella.
Yeah. If you read the rule book, it's very confusing. Of course, how they have the rule book written on brand. Very confusing. If you go look at the blindside block parameters, assuming that's what they call, or is that the reason that they call it unnecessary roughness because they looked at it? Did they call unnecessary roughness because they said, well, he shouldn't have hit the quarterback like that? That's one thing.
Right. Yeah.
If they called it because it's a blindside block, that's complete, BS. Because literally the rule, and Steve Shaw, who's over the NCAA officials, has gone on record with this, plus it's in the rule book. If you extend your arms, that's fine. Somebody pursuing the ball, you extend your arms. Kennard was kind of squared up at that point. BS, But then you've got even Rocket Sanders gets dragged down out of bounds. No call.
Mm-hmm.
Lenora Sellers gets the JBL clothesline from Heck on a rushing defensive lineman on an interception into the end zone that was a touchback. No call. So those are the things that are very, very tough to swallow, right? The pass interference, here's the best I can come up with.
And by the way, Chris, before you give
Yeah.
that answer, the one on Lenoris that was missed, you can go back and look at that one because I thought Reese and Kirk actually did a fantastic job throughout the game. Listen back to it, but everybody missed that. Like I don't think anybody even mentioned that he got hit in the face. But if you go back and look at that one, I mean that one's not even controversial. Like it is clear that he got hit in the face.
Yes,
and I think that's a play where obviously that changes the course of the game.
Yep.
You can go back and look on the slot fade. I sent you this one on the slot fade that LSU hit. God, there's so many sequences. It's right before, I think before the 4-down stop. But then if you look at that sequence, South Carolina gets the stop, but then LSU forces a punt, and then LSU does go down and score. Slot fade, South Carolina, I believe it was Kennard, ironically. He's getting held, and then he's getting held by his face mask by the left tackle. Doesn't get seen at all. And then to go back to the offensive pass interference, I'm ready for your explanation because I got nothing.
I'm not saying this is the answer. This is my best theory. At first, I was like, okay, they called it on Mazio Bennett because he basically ran a route and then an LSU defender's right in front of him, and they had like a very small collision way behind the ball. But I think maybe they were calling it on Nick Carver. No?
Let me
that's bad.
No, let me add to it. Let me add to the intrigue of this. So that play was actually sort of near where I was in the stadium. If it was called on Harbor, then that guy made the call from what's the dimensions of the field across? 53 yards?
Yeah.
He made the call from 65 yards away.
Okay, so that was my question. Did it come from? I couldn't tell on the broadcast where.
So I think they called it on Mazio because he threw the flag right at, like the official that threw it was right by Mazio and threw it in his direction. Like I saw the flag before I even saw the catch. Like I was like, what is that call? And I mean,
that's bad. And meanwhile, Delvon Campbell makes that catch with a hand on his shoulder, hand in the face, getting face guarded. And it's like, that's fine. We'll call the guy 20 yards behind the play for running into somebody. And that's, even if, Wes, you could look at the pass interference rule, which I highly doubt. It's probably worded very confusingly. And even if it fit the letter of the law, like have a little nuance if you're an official. You know what I mean?
Well, for one, and I don't have it right in front of me. Is the ball even in the air yet at that point when they collided? Maybe it was. I don't know. But two, okay, you could just as easily call that on the defender. Like receivers and DBs have a collision point all the time.
Almost every play. Yeah.
Yeah, and if the ball's not in the air, or even when it is, a lot of times if it's just incidental contact like that, that's not getting called. Like
you're actually, I've heard this point from defensive coordinators before. Like you're allowed to collision in college football.
Yeah, yeah.
So
they kind of teach it. There are certain coverages where
it's catch technique.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was pitiful. Wes, the other one that was brought up was and Beamer, I thought I think he walked the line very well actually on Sunday night, last night on the teleconference. Go check that out. It's on the YouTube page, youtube.com/GamecockCentral. I know you put it up last night. He did a good job of walking the line, of giving some explanations on some of the specific calls, some examples, while probably avoiding himself a fine. If he got a fine, so what? Who cares at this point, honestly? He mentioned after the game the taunting, which I didn't see. Probably not many Gamecock fans saw it because they immediately sunk down into their seats and collapsed into the stadium. But, he mentioned that. So that's another good point. He said there were 2 clear instances of taunting that weren't called. And, rightly pointed out, when you have 22 flags in the game, when you're flagging a phantom offensive pass interference, that we're still sitting here trying to figure out who the call was even on, and you don't call that. Again, hard to swallow, So, inconsistent. By the way, I actually reached out. I would be flabbergasted if we actually heard back, but I reached out to the league office seeking clarification or a statement or something on a few calls yesterday. I got an initial response back of, hey, here's who you need to send your questions to. I sent them. Haven't heard anything back yet. Doubt we will. The SEC protects. And when I say protect, I don't mean physically. Obviously, anybody threatening harm to a football player or an official over the outcome of a football game needs to get seriously examined. But I just mean protection in terms of, criticism and performance, etc. SEC officials always have been extremely well protected on that front. Players, coaches, media members, we're all fair. They're all fair game. For some reason, officials have this crazy protected status. And there's a lot of conversation, Wes. I think the amount of people who aren't Gamecock fans jumping in saying, yeah, that was kind of crazy, illustrates how bad it was. There's some conversations about what can we do to make this thing better. I'm skeptical anything happens, but it was a shame, I think, that football game, which was a really good game. LSU fan, South Carolina fan, casual observer, great football game. Great performances, like gritty on the part of both teams, big plays. It's been marred by that. And we see that too much. We see that too much in college athletics, really.
Yeah, and game itself, you could not have asked for more drama. Like, it was, this thing had everything. You had a block punt, which that's controversial too. If I'm LSU, I'm going over the what do you call it? Going over the little wall there. That's maybe something to look at as well. But it is kind of hilarious that LSU of all teams is the one also sending in plays from this game. But you know what, man? It was poorly officiated, kind of on all sides. I feel like it was a tear for everything else that was well done and that was great about college football on that day, game day. Just the fact that you can drop that set right down into the middle of Gamecock Park and have thousands of people out there and the drone views of everything. I mean, it was a fantastic day for college football and for South Carolina and for everything leading up to it. The fact we're talking about the stripes is just, I don't know, man. It does suck for the game, I feel like. And there were people tuned into this thing. Like, it was, sometimes I feel like that the national TV audience thing is a little bit overblown in 2024 because every game is on TV. Every game, technically, you can see from pretty much anywhere in the country. But this one, I mean, is definitely the best game on at noon and probably the biggest game on at noon. So people were tuned in. It had excitement. Like I said, it had big, great plays. It had some big, bad plays. JB here makes a good point that I kind of agree with. Having a 17-point lead that early is way different than having a lead like that late in a game. I see people saying, don't blow a 17-point lead. If you're going to blame South Carolina and sort of say, forget the officials, I have more of a problem, and I'm sure that's what they'll see in film review. Just the small things that become big things. And, you know, I don't look at it as blowing it. You know, LSU once it went to 17, they responded, went right back down the field, made it 17-7. At that point, you're going, this game is nowhere near over.
Yeah, that's right.
Like this was, each side had adjustments, but I go back, man, some missed tackling, just tackling too high, not wrapping up. I don't know if South Carolina, I don't think they got tired necessarily. I wonder if they almost got a little too excited in the moment. And you know, you're flying to the football. Maybe there's a little bit more of, hey, let's get under control and break down and wrap up when we get there. But both sides were playing so hard. I think they at times lost their, all right, we got to play hard and very, very detail oriented and smart. And so I think, you know, throwing, even though he got hit in the face, throwing the interception when you're already in field goal range, the 2 sacks, but both quarterbacks for Carolina had sacks where you're in a situation where you have the lead and you're backed up. Mm-hmm. You got to have that sort of internal clock where you're going, all right, this play is probably over. I'm about to get hit. Those were huge fumbles. Let's see, taking a sack when you're in field goal range already at the end of the half. Like there were little things that you kind of already circle and you're saying, hey, if Carolina loses this game, then that's going to be a play we're going to remember. Now with this game, there were like 10 of those, I feel like. And if LSU had lost, honestly, they would be saying the same thing. I left, maybe nobody wants to talk about this part, but real quick, I left with an extreme amount of respect for Garrett Nussmeier. Like that dude is, he is not a game manager. He is not he's waited behind Jaden Daniels and he's like a stopgap until they get their next. Man, he made some incredible throws in this game. There were tight windows. He was throwing the ball shortstop style, like sidearm. I mean, I dare say that dude made himself some money on Saturday. Like that looked like an NFL quarterback to me.
Yeah, that I was talking about that with somebody after the game. It's like he took some hits. He was under some pressure at times. He did a great job. He's definitely a gamer, and you got to give them credit too. Talk about a lot of these mistakes South Carolina made. LSU made mistakes. Yeah, did they benefit from some calls? Sure, but they stayed in it. 17-0. They're down. Could have folded up their tent. Didn't. And you're right. When they answered West, I immediately thought, all right, this is going to be. You kind of were wondering at that point, can South Carolina run away with it? Will LSU answer? They did answer, and then obviously stayed in it and made this thing a game. And I thought LSU did a good job, offensively of making some adjustments. Their offensive line, Wes, coming in, I like how Cole Cubilet, SEC Network described it. It's going to be a heavyweight fight. That's what it was. South Carolina got the better early. Will Campbell, their big-time left tackle, had his worst pass protection grade of the season by far. It was less than 50. Now, he only had technically a hit and I think a pressure credited to him. But Carolina won some of those battles. They sped things up front. I thought LSU did a good job running the ball. Put in their young running back. Did a really good job. Broke some tackles. Like Shane Beamer mentioned on the Sunday teleconference, South Carolina missed more tackles than typical. I counted them up. I think PFF had like 17, Wes. A little bit higher than usual. And I do agree with you. I think Carolina was keyed up a little bit. Fatigued, I can't figure out. Lost in this is the fact that USC lost TJ Sanders during that game. Went in the injury tent for a while. He came back out. He was on the sideline. Don't think he went back in the game. He only played, I think, 20-something snaps in the game. Would have played a lot more. So did that have some type of small effect when you think about the run game? Yes, could have. Jerry Brown offensively got hurt. Gamecocks had, think about another play. They had to settle for a field goal one time where they threw a slant pattern into the end zone, would have been a touchdown on a 3rd and 7. Ball wasn't caught. So some of the runs that squirted out for LSU, some extra yardage, some plays where you're very close to making a play and you don't, some great throws by Nussmeier and individual efforts. There are a lot of those things that happened in the game that you could point to as well. But I think the hard thing is it's hard to stomach some of the calls and stuff. But I think going back and looking at the film, and Beamer alluded to this on last night, there were a lot of issues that had nothing to do with the officials. What you talked about, the ball security, some of the decisions, some of the near misses. LSU's looking at the film going, hey, we might have won this game handily if we didn't give up a 75-yard run to the quarterback, a 60-something yard run to the running back. Just huge plays all around, and probably more than a handful of them contributed one way or another to South Carolina losing the game.
Well, and I think, Chris, it was a lot of explosive plays given up on both sides in the running game. Like it was kind of crazy. Like South Carolina defensively, like I see people talking about them, giving up the edge on some of those plays. That's true. South Carolina, a lot of the time, did a great job of stopping the run. But then you had, I haven't counted how many chunk plays there were. There were chunk plays by LSU that were obviously massive in the game. And, I thought early on, South Carolina really ran the ball well against LSU. Then there was kind of a little lull in that, but then you have the two just massive runs that, LSU was sitting there just literally. I think Kelly was shaking his head after the rocket run over there. I think there was a great shot of him that were both of those were answers, like Carolina answering back to what LSU had done to scores. And so it was really a game of explosive plays. And, you're LSU, you're sitting there going, like, I wonder what that film room looks like from a run game standpoint. They got at times nothing out of the running game. They got stuffed on, a 3rd and short a couple of times. They got stuffed down at the goal line. But then they're also going to look and say, hey, we may have found something. We may have found our running back. And we did have some missed tackles that LSU's going, we created missed tackles. South Carolina's going, we missed tackles. So I think it's one of those games, man, you could spend 10 hours on the film of this game and maybe find something new every time you watch. And we're at 32, almost 33 minutes of this podcast. We haven't even mentioned, hey, the starting quarterback for South Carolina got injured. So how different is it if and I went back and watched, so Beamer mentioned that give to Rocket after he had come back into the game where Lenoris didn't keep it. And that's a play where you're looking out there and the staff is going, hey, if we have our guy, like if Lenoris is healthy, then he's keeping that ball and probably running for 10 and a first down, maybe more. But LSU is going, we're just going to crash the edges because we don't trust that Sellers can run right now. So, how much is the game different? And I think on one hand, you do have to give Robbie a ton of credit, man. Like I felt for that kid. You could see in the shots kind of how much it affected him. But he went out there. He gave the team a chance. Like he gave him a shot, even got him back down there in field goal range, made a couple of big throws. The one on the drive that set up the field goal, the one that got wiped out by the phantom offensive pass interference, had a 2-point conversion that got wiped out. That one was by the letter of the law. I think illegal man downfield. I went back and looked at it. I mean, very ticky-tack. I'll just put it like that.
Yeah, Beamer said that was one of the ones they were seeking clarification on.
So I've been going through. I've rewatched the game on TV copy. When they have it, I always go back and look through the Skycast as well. And so I've not watched the whole game via Skycast. I've watched particular plays on that. And so you can actually see Vershawn. He's going for a block, and the guy kind of gets out of his way, and he sort of not stumbles, but like his momentum takes him into the end zone, which 3 yards. So the end zone is basically illegal man downfield. Vershawn, as soon as he crosses that plane, backs up and gets back into the regular. It's not like he's blocking this guy downfield, like literally into passing lanes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, again, what's the terminology on that? Is it the moment you're 3.5 yards downfield, you're called and there's no leeway? I don't know. I'd love to know what the clarification is, honestly.
Well, I was going to say, Wes, it's going to sound like a big contradiction, which it is, that apparently on some calls, the officials were big letter of the law people. But then on others, they weren't. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
Travis, most of the time we agree. No O-line was standing in the end zone at the end of that play. But I see what they saw. Like, I do see what they saw. Vershawn does go into the end zone. Now, he's been playing a long time. He instantly, like I said, once he steps into the end zone, he backs up and gets back within that 3-yard window. Mm-hmm. So I don't know exactly what the letter of the law is on that as well. So if you look at the end of that play from the TV copy, you're like, what did they call? If you look at the view from above, you can see it. You can at least on that one, you can at least see what they were thinking. Now, whether was it right, was it, I don't know. Took away a beautiful play by Robbie. I don't know how he saw that guy. I don't know if he saw that guy, but it ended up being a crazy play. But it does kind of stink that we just keep going back to the officiating in this game, even though I feel like we're not trying to, Chris. It's just such an element of everything that happened. But I mean, I can't help but think, how is it different if Sellers has his legs, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you go, well, would even a Gimpy which you understand why they didn't play him, in that situation, but you go, would even a Gimpy Sellers, would you have had more of a downfield presence in the passing game? Or, obviously if he didn't, get rolled up and wasn't injured at all, would South Carolina have been able to win that game or even maybe coast to a win? I don't know. Here's something, Wes, that I think is on my mind. So you remember after the Kentucky game, I got very irritated because people, some of them were South Carolina fans, some of them were just college football fans, observers, did this thing that people always tend to do if a team loses a game big. Kentucky sucks. They stink. Carolina beat them 31-6. They are god awful. It's like, well, actually, I watched this week and they almost beat Georgia. Now maybe Georgia, probably didn't play their best game, but Kentucky lost by literally 1 point to Georgia, and they were leading most of that game. Georgia's pretty good, I think, number 2 in the country. They were number 1. I think what we've learned through 3 weeks, I think South Carolina is a pretty good team. I don't know what their record will be, but there is zero doubt in my mind that they're improved as a team. What does that mean? We'll see. You've lost the LSU game. You got to go beat Akron. You're going to have to go beat a team that, quite frankly, is probably better than LSU. And you may have to do it on the road. You may have to do it at home, like a team like Missouri. Like, to get where you really want to go, you're going to have to go spring an upset. You're probably going to have to beat a team that's probably better than LSU to do it. But that was a very close game. Point is, I think LSU is a pretty good team. Offensively, does South Carolina have some problems? Yeah. But they scored. Let's take out the Nicky pick 6 from the Kentucky game. They scored 24 points on offense. Georgia didn't do that. Southern Cal and Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley's had the last 15 Heisman winners, it seems like. They scored 27 on LSU. Point is, are there problems offensively where South Carolina's got to get a lot better? Penalties, turnovers, decisions. play calling, like we can talk about all that. That's all very, very valid. But man, let's not act like it's that bad. You know, the defense is way better for the Gamecocks. We could talk about, the missed tackles, the big plays. Those are an issue in this game. Got to get them cleaned up. But despite this loss, like you can see the growth. And I think we can't look at Kentucky now and say, that was just South Carolina just beat a bad team. Kentucky's not a bad team. They might not win a whole lot of games this year, but they're going to give everybody a pretty good game. We saw that, right? So let's not do the thing where, this team stinks. Let's give South Carolina some credit. They're improved. They're better. We'll see what that means from a record standpoint, but there are a lot of good teams in this conference. It's week to week. It's always about who's a little bit better in that one particular game, right? I don't think we're going to have many games, Wes, in the SEC this year where we just go, that's a blowout. I really don't think we're going to see too many of those games. South Carolina actually had one last week that was a blowout in the Kentucky game. I think that's more of a rarity. I think almost every game in the SEC is probably going to come down, with the exception of a few games, a couple teams involved, probably going to come down to a handful of plays, just like the LSU-South Carolina game did. We've seen South Carolina improve. We've seen them play a couple teams that I think are pretty good teams. Do they all have their warts and problems? Yes. But very, very competitive.
No doubt. All right, before we go any further, Chris, let's tell everybody about our friends over at Game Time. So, man, we just made the decision. We're going. I don't have to cover the games on the road. We're going to the Vandy game. Me and the wife, and we haven't done the Nashville trip together ever. So, hey, Game Time app right there. You can pull it up. You see it. South Carolina at Vandy. Not. I mean, let's be honest. Not exactly that is the toughest ticket on the planet. But if there is a tough ticket, the Game Time app or GameTime.co has got you covered. Great thing about this thing is you got an app with all the features you could possibly think of. Right there, you see it says, I don't know if you can see that or not, but the super deal, which basically tells me, hey, this is one of the best deals available right now in the top 1%. Says you found a super deal. There's only 2 tickets left at this price. These tickets are in the top 1% of this event based on value. Another great thing about it, when you click it, you can see exactly the view of the field from your seat if you were to buy that ticket. Also, fantastic. You have all-in pricing where you can tap to see the total upfront price with no surprise fees at checkout. And one of my favorite parts about it is the Game Time guarantee. You always find the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference on that price. So go ahead, download the Game Time app right now. Create an account, use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Whew. All right. We still got a lot to get to in this thing. So, about the offense, Chris. I've already seen some people kind of grabbing well, hey, what does South Carolina look like right now? Total offense in the SEC, statistically, or points per game versus, compared to other SEC teams. I don't know that that's fair to even compare them yet. Because, and I don't think it's fair, honestly, guys, everybody can have an opinion. That's fine. I don't think it's fair to say that South Carolina played not to lose in the second half offensively when you had a backup quarterback in the game. South Carolina in the first half really moved the ball very well on offense. Mm-hmm. And, you go back to that Kentucky game. Yeah, South Carolina had a big third quarter. I'm not convinced they couldn't have had a much bigger first half if not for the fact that one of those drives you started out backed up, way backed up in the shadow of your own goal line. And you're saying, we got a young quarterback. We got to be smart here. You had a couple of drives that were kind of wiped out, frankly, by a couple of holds that maybe could have gone somewhere. You, of course, this is now 2 games in a row where you have had beautiful full field drives early on in the game. So that to me tells me when your own script early on, like Carolina has had some good game plans the last 2 games, and they have been well executed. So, did you get sort of, I guess, stuck in the mud a little bit in this game? Yes, but how much of that is because you did have a change at quarterback? How much of what some people will say is conservative play calling is them calling the game frankly, to the strengths of the quarterback that's in the game at that time? And so, what would this offense look differently if 16 was just out there for the entirety of these 3 games so far? I would argue absolutely yes. So as fun as it is, as much as that's the thing we just do around here is, bash Dow Loggins. And don't get me wrong, after game 1, I was sitting there going, what the heck is going on? But if you ask me, there's been 2 pretty good game plans the last 2 weeks. Like, you can see what South Carolina was trying to do. And it was what we talked about, man. Lots of man coverage from LSU. We saw significantly more slants, crossing routes, the little underneath flat RPO throw to the tight end. Like, we saw South Carolina with a game plan that had a chance to work against what LSU was doing defensively. Did it always work? Of course not. But that's football. There's a cat and mouse game going on. Just like there was a cat and mouse game going on when Carolina was on defense with Clayton White and LSU's coordinator. So that's football. But I'm not saying this is going to be a world-beating offense, but I actually think there's been more positive signs. If Sellers is able to get back to 100% pretty quickly, there's some signs this offense could have a chance to be pretty good as this year goes on.
Yeah, and the other thing about Sellers is that, unfortunately, Wes, some people have taken, despite our caution, the quote that Loggins gave saying he doesn't make the same mistake twice. Of course, people have taken that literally. Well, he's fumbled the ball more than once. Like, it's not quite literal, This isn't a senior quarterback, right? This is a guy who can continue to get better, and in the 3rd game of his college career, he's running 75 yards for a touchdown against LSU. And are there still mistakes? Yeah, I tend to think, the big emphasis that Shane Beamer mentioned is we can't go backwards in this game. We got to eliminate negative plays, especially early on when Sellers was in the game. I looked up at one point, Wes, and this was not, 5 minutes into the game. I said, man, I don't really remember any negative plays for South Carolina. They had some eventually, right? They had the sacks. The turnovers are the biggest thing. The turnovers have been, they had too many negative plays at Kentucky too, right? But can you get incrementally better in that department each week? Maybe. Can you get better in the turnover department with just some of the decision making? Can the staff help Sellers or help Robbie Ashford with some of the calls and some of the coaching points that can maybe eliminate some of those things? Can they just grow? Can a young player like Lenoris just grow, as we've already seen from game 1 to 2 to 3? I think so, right? So point is, there's still some upside to this offense. We can't look around. Look, I'll make a prediction, Wes. Ole Miss's offense will be better than South Carolina's this year, okay? Like, that's probably – Missouri's probably going to be better on offense, right? But, Missouri has played Murray State, Buffalo, and Boston College, and they beat Boston College, who's a good team, by the way, by 6 at home and scored 27 points. Missouri hadn't even played a conference game yet. Neither is Ole Miss. Let's get into conference play and then check out the stats and check out the turnovers. More importantly, you're just going to be checking the win-loss record, right? And so We thought this team's identity would be more, hey, they're built more to run the ball with Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders and the tight ends. We've kind of seen that, right? Has it been ugly or disjointed at times? Have there been too many turnovers and negative plays? Yes. Has the offense done enough in every game to win? Yeah. I mean, pretty much. Game one, I'm looking at game one way, that was way uglier than game three to me. Do you have to go get better? Yeah. I mean, they're going to play better teams than LSU the rest of this year, some of them on the road. So you got to get it right. But the point is, I don't think the offense is a finished product by any means.
Yeah, no doubt. And, this is a game where it's hard to even put into perspective some of the things that happen. Like, defense is going to get credited with some points that were given up, but they were in bad spots at times. Offense got a little assist from a block punt. So, I mean, you can look at it on paper and be like, hey, they scored 33 points. You really expect to win a lot of games, especially at home with this defense when you score 33 points. But again, defense was put in some bad spots at times. Offense to me looked like a team that is led by a young, very dynamic, very big play quarterback. But also you had some of those reminders where you're saying, oh, well, yeah, he is still a young quarterback. And that's sort of what it is. And so I am curious. Sometimes it's just results. Results are what they are. So like with Satterfield, was it time for a change there for South Carolina? Probably so. But when people bash on a coordinator for specific games, and I'd like to know what did you see from the coordinator other than it didn't work? Like most people, and I'll put myself in this as well. If you're watching a game live, there's so much happening. You can't even tell what routes a team was running. You know what I'm saying? Like, what defense were they in? What was the concept actually supposed to look like on the field compared to what happened? Now, I get it. There becomes a certain point where you're going, if the production is not good enough throughout the course of a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons, that you just have to make a change. Hey, I agree with that. But in the confines of the last 2 games, I really don't think, unless somebody can tell me, hey, we were trying to run this concept against that concept, and that was stupid, and there's no reason that should be called. I really have a problem blaming what we saw on Dow Loggins. Like I really don't think this game is remotely on him. So again, if anybody can give me specific details, I would love to hear them. But Chris, on the other side, I thought there was a great cat and mouse game between LSU and South Carolina. And, both sides won that thing at times. Like I thought LSU made some great adjustments. You kind of got the feeling early on, they thought, oh, our offensive line, we know what we have. We know who they are. We're just going to block teams like usual. And South Carolina, like a great sign for them was you were not overwhelmed by this LSU offensive line by any means. South Carolina won that battle a lot, especially early on. But then it felt to me like LSU adjusted. They said, hey, we're going to have to go to quick game. Got the ball out much quicker. You could tell Nussmeier knew, even on some of those 3rd and longs, he mentally knows, all right, I'm going to get hit. Mm-hmm. I just have to give this route there are a couple of 3rd down throws where most quarterbacks are not making those throws. It was more, he knew exactly where the ball's got to be. He knows I'm probably going to get hit, and he knows I'm going to get this ball out at the last possible second. And it might be from sidearm, it might be from over the top, and all these things. So to me, that was part of LSU's adjustment, just from a mindset standpoint. I know exactly where I got to go with the ball with a quickness. Then I thought at times LSU, they would start out spread out like they were for a lot of the game, and then motion that tight end back inside the box and were max protecting. Well, then South Carolina's adjustment, they let them show max protect and then showed blitz and backed out, which if you look, the Emamori should have been pick 6. That was South Carolina backing out into a throwing lane. And Chris, even you remember the play early on where it looked like it was an opportunity for maybe an interception, but Collier came off of his guy, ran into the LSU player in the end zone. Watching that play live, I thought it was incidental contact. Watching the replay, I was like, okay, probably a PI. But it was, to me, that was an example of LSU thinking South Carolina was blitzing, and then they dropped back into those throwing lanes. And that allowed Collier, he had all eyes on the quarterback. He came off of his guy. When that ball goes up, I'm thinking there's a chance at an interception potentially here. So there was a great little just game within the game battle. LSU, give them credit. South Carolina's rushing hard up the field. There was one play detailed by Kurt where South Carolina edge guy, defensive end, the play before whipped the offensive tackle to the outside. And LSU just said, all right, if they're going to do that, we're going to run the ball inside of him.
Yeah.
On the very next play. And it worked for a gain. So that's kind of the little battles within the game that are going on throughout the full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I think some games we've looked back on, and Wes, I mean, you alluded to, past staff and things like that. Sometimes you go, or even with this staff, like, man, like, ooh, some maybe things that don't make as much sense. Like, I didn't see a lot of calls this game where you're like, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand what they're trying to do. Even defensively, like a team like LSU, particularly with their offense, Wes, with that offensive line, with Nussmeier, with some of the backs they have, some of the receivers they have, the tight end Mason Taylor's really good, as we know. They're going to hit you on some plays, whether it's just there's going to be some plays where my guy's a little bit better than your guy in that particular instance. And that can go back and forth, right? There's some plays where LSU's offensive tackles blocked Dylan Stewart or Kyle Kennard. There were some plays where they definitely didn't. That's a battle, right? These games between these type of teams are rarely, if ever, going to be one-sided. And so I think there were some calls where LSU, Beamer mentioned one Sunday night, he was asked to detail one of LSU's touchdown plays. And Beamer said, yeah, they had for the defense that we were in, they had a really good call on. That happens. There were some plays where South Carolina, you think about the Sellers touchdown run. Sellers and the blocking made a lot of that happen, and Sellers made a guy miss and then had green grass. That's a good play call against the defense that they have. So I think we saw both of those things. Point is at the end of the day, it was a pretty darn evenly matched game in all phases between those two teams.
Well, can you imagine if the final field goal goes in, that every single thing that happened in that game resulted in a tie score after 60 minutes? Like that would have been insane. If that game had everything and then you play for 60 minutes and it's still not decided. Which, by the way, if you were in the stadium, did y'all notice that the wind picked up again when he was right about to kick that thing?
We definitely did. My wife mentioned that to me. She's like, it's windy.
It's like, it is.
So here comes the wind.
I'm convinced that's why they didn't try the long field goal at the end of the half. Because, the wind was – I couldn't tell which direction the wind was going because it was swirling so often in so many different ways. But it was like there was no wind. And then he starts to line up, and I'm looking around like, wait. This is about to affect this play one way or the other. And I'm not so sure it didn't. Chris, did you think it was, from your angle, did you think it was going in after he hit it? Or
Yeah, when he hit it at first, I was like, "It looks good," but you're kind of tracking it the whole time.
Yeah.
So where I was sitting at, what was it, 106? So I was towards that left upright, and
Yeah.
then I'm looking down this way. So I'm like, looks pretty good, but you are kind of tracking its tailing. And then a lot of people, even in our section, because of the vantage point, thought that it was good. But
Yeah.
I was like, I think that didn't. I was like, I didn't think that made it in there. So yeah, I mean,
It was close.
it was close, and there's a lot of what ifs there. A lot of what ifs for sure. That kick, hey, it would have been great if you make it, go to overtime and kind of see what happens. But obviously that kick did not lose that football game. It's the last play of the game, but there are so many, and we've gone through a bunch of them that you could pick out.
Yeah, I'm sure we missed a bunch, to be honest, y'all. Like, we tried to break this thing down as much as we could in an hour, but I'm sure we missed a lot because, I mean, we didn't even talk about how fantastic Rocket Sanders was. So let's throw a shout out of that. I mean, he talk about doing it on a national stage. Like, you could tell the announcers were like, okay, like, this guy is back, and good for him, man. All the work he's put in. He broke tackles. He showed speed. He showed everything you'd be looking for in an NFL back. So hopefully that is helpful for him down the road as he continues to get back to 100%. But hey, we'll see what happens, y'all. Akron this week. We'll probably do a little bit more on this game tomorrow, I would think, just because there was so much. Then we'll start to turn the page to Akron. Very, very, I was going to say beatable. I think everybody already knows that. This is a game that you would think and hope is not one that looks like game one, not one that you have to sort of squeak by. Should be a chance to get some other guys in the game. Chris, I think if Sellers is not 100%, you think long and hard about giving him another week, especially with the bye week on deck. We all know what's coming after that. It's a 3-game stretch that, any team in the country might struggle with. So I think it's imperative to get 16 back 100% for that 3-game stretch. If that means sitting him this week, then having the bye week, so be it. And go from there. South Carolina opened as a 27-point favorite in this game, which gives you kind of an idea of what the Vegas thought is on this thing. So, all right, y'all, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate you as always. Sorry if we missed things from the game. I know it was a lot. We'll try to hit on some of those on Tuesday and then turn the page to Akron. For Chris, I'm Wes. Please come on over. Check us out, GamecockCentral.com. Love to have you over there on the website as well. And